Hello and welcome to That Nerd Thing, where we uncover the magical impact that fandoms have on our lives. I'm Morgan, and today I am joined by another podcaster that I've been listening to for almost 19 years. And I was joking the other day that sometimes I think I created this podcast just so I could, become friends with and talk to all of the people that I've been fans of for years. So I'm so excited. Today I am chatting with Eric from MuggleCast and a brand new podcast, which I'm excited to talk about, called What the Hype. So hi, Eric. I'm so excited that you're here today.
Hello, Morgan. I am thrilled to be here. I'm honestly very touched that you reached out and for your long listening history to MuggleCast, and I'm just very grateful to you for that, and it's been a wild journey. I'm excited to talk about, the nerd thing. Yeah.
So I have been, people might not know what I'm talking about right now, but I've been a listener since, the Pickle Pack days. I remember you did a vlog, I think when you were living in New Zealand. I followed that. So,
wow.
Longtime fan. This is so weird to me.
Yeah, I mean, the video clips that I did from New Zealand where you had to download them over DSL or 56K at the time. They were MOV format QuickTime videos. You had to log into the Pickle Pack website. It was a whole thing. There wasn't YouTube back then.
Wow, that's true. Wow, that's crazy. I have the Pickle Pack shirt somewhere. I should have worn it today. I'll post it on social media once I find it.
Yeah, it sounds good. Yeah.
Do you want to share about your new podcast?
Yeah, so thanks for asking. The new podcast that was launched by some fellow guests that you've had on the podcast so far is called What the Hype, and it's a new popular culture podcast, and we're very excited. The hosts of MuggleCast's and #Millennial have gotten together and created something that is, in some ways, the show that we would always want to do or see done for pop culture, with varying levels of engagement. So if you're a super fan, you get sated, but also if you're just starting out or you haven't seen something, we can give an overview. And we were just very intentional and very deliberate with sort of some of the plans and structure of the show, which has not yet been fully seen or fleshed out, because we are doing this thing now where we're kind of keeping up with demand. We have to talk about the shows that are just coming out for SEO and things like that. But so we have some episodes in the can that are deeper dives and all sorts of stuff that will be making their way to the airwaves within the next month. But I think the full scope of what you can do with the podcast is grander than we've touched on yet, but we see it, we know it, we're planning for it. So I'm actually just very excited because the launch has been great over the last maybe 10 or 14 days since it started appearing. The feedback has been wonderful, but also I know that what we have coming is equally exciting as well. So we're really excited to just be able to finally share the show. We've been working on it for most of the year, and yeah, it's What the Hype, and it's able to be found where podcasts are found, just like this show.
It's so good, and I'm so excited to, every Friday I'm ooh, what's going to come out this week? So I'm really looking forward to it. It's so funny that you all have been planning it for most of this year, when this podcast I planned in from mid-November and launched it first week of January. I was I need to just get it out. I can't wait anymore. So I don't know how you all did that and planned it for so long.
Well, I'll tell you, part of it is having an existing weekly podcast to do, and in fact, for some of us, two podcasts weekly in Millennial and MuggleCast, and so we planned it over months as code for we had maybe 30 minutes a week. Total to spare where we could meet for this while doing our other stuff. And now, so that's why it took a few months to get together, I think, is we were already stretched pretty thin, but we're very, we're very excited about it. We're very passionate about it for sure.
But I also think you all have put so much work into it, and that's why the quality of it is so great. So it definitely appears very well thought out and very well put together.
Well, I appreciate that, and I don't want to discredit the work that my fellow co-hosts have done, too. We have an extensive planning document with a schedule that Pamela has put together of all the big releases, like pop culture type releases for the next calendar year or more, as well as plans to tie that into episodes, revisit, do sequel episodes to the ones we've already done. It's actually... I was being modest before. It's meticulously planned, and we have a lot of really good stuff coming. So yeah, it's funny because as much as we were, I joked spread thin, but as much as we already had active, weekly podcasts going, we still were so excited by this idea and the possibility to do one, that's why we, worked it in. When you're, I think this is true with being a nerd. When you're passionate about something, you find the time for it. Mm-hmm. And so just like that, starting our new podcast was like that exact thing, as we were having multiple meetings a week for our various podcasts, and that included, planning this new show. So it's cool. Great that it's finally out, and we're very excited about the future.
I was thinking about sending in a request form to request that when Severance season 2 comes out, that you cover it. I don't know if you're a fan of that show, but I was like, that would be such a cool show for them to cover.
Yeah, that would be cool. Definitely. I don't know if there's a form on the website yet. I'm not as familiar with all the ways we do things, but you can email us and suggest anything you want us to talk about. Who knows? You might get invited to be the expert guest that we have on to tell us all about it.
Yeah, I was just on the part 2 Bridgerton episode, and that was so much fun.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I heard good things from that. Bridgerton is the one thing where I was like, I'm watching The Boys. I had to kind of choose between The Boys or Bridgerton, and I went for The Boys, not for any particular reason, I assure you, because I love historical stuff, and I love kink and cool stuff that I gather is also in Bridgerton. But as a result, I would just explode if I took in all these new shows all at once. So because I hadn't been on Bridgerton, but it's totally on my list. It's what we say when recommending pop culture. Oh, yeah, I know. I'll get to it when I can.
Are you ready to get into your nerdy identity?
I would love to.
What was the first thing that you were nerdy about?
I remember, I think, being identified as being nerdy about something, to me, sparks, thoughts of coming of age era, so, teenage years, because there's certain things that you like as a kid. There are movies I've seen 100,000 times because they were either always on or I'd put them on as a kid. But I think that nerd identity is when you start choosing something or seeking something out that might not immediately be in front of you. So I'm going to go with right around age 13, or I was 12 or 13, when the X-Men movie came out, directed by Bryan Singer, starring Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, and Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. That film and the X-Men animated series that was still airing on TV, I think maybe Channel 11 or something, right when I'd get home from school, were the first the first property that I was really obsessed with. And this was over a year before I would find Harry Potter. I got into Harry Potter fairly late, after the first movie had come out, or pretty much within 6 months of the movie coming out. And so this was easily 12 to 16 months before that. I wanted to... Are you familiar with X-Men, by the way?
I've seen Wolverine in some of those movies, and I know of it, but I haven't seen them. It's on my list.
It's on your list. You'll get to it when you can. Yeah, no, I would recommend, honestly, the first movie and the first 2 movies that were produced by Fox, X-Men and X2. They are really, really good at capturing what the comics were about, what that world is about. We're only starting now to see kind of that be picked up in the MCU as a property. But what the director did with that is make it sort of like a gay allegory. Make it a little bit more of an overt gay allegory, because X-Men in the comics were teenage mutants. They are outcasts, both society makes them outcasts, and also some of them are dangerous. They didn't ask for these powers, but they have them. And I gotta tell you, being 12 or 13, And, who among us has not felt at times like an outcast? But I wanted to be a student at Xavier Institute for Gifted Youngsters, and I wanted to be included. I would have dreams about X-Men where I was included in strategic decision-making that my teammates, the fellow X-Men, were making. And I got way head over heels into this, and, to be honest, even, part of the reason I think it consumed a lot of waking hours is that I would also be able to roleplay X-Men on chat rooms, AOL chat rooms at the time, and we'd all, pick a character and create, scenarios and episodes and basically do text-based roleplay, which is something that I really credit with helping me mature. A lot of the people I was doing that with were a few years older than me. And so at a young age, I got a big vocabulary, but emotionally, it was like a family. And it was so that's kind of the magical school I first fell in love with, is the X-Men school prior to finding Harry Potter.
That's so fascinating. I did not know that about you.
Yeah,
wow.
It's something I don't really have an opportunity to talk about much, which is why when you sent around the outline, I was like, I know I'm going to whip this. I have a few surprises up my sleeve, but I'm going to whip that one out because X-Men, I'm very, very passionate about it. I think the only thing that rivaled it in my life at the time was Pokemon, because the Pokemon the movie 2000 was out that same year, maybe even that same summer, and that's another thing where I would watch it as soon as I got home from school. And it was just ubiquitous. It was everywhere.
So have you seen, what is it, X-Men 97?
Not yet, and I'll tell you because we're definitely going to be doing What the Hype's about it in the future. I'm planning to fully go head over heels into it. The only reason I have not seen X-Men 97, and I die slowly every day I'm not watching it, is because I said I wanted to rewatch the original animated series, which has been 20 years prior to watching X-Men 97. One of the characters that I would always portray in the roleplay is a character called Morph. It was like a shapeshifter. You may have heard of Mystique, who's actually more popular in the films, but Morph could do pretty much the same powers. He was also like a comic prankster, jokester kind of character. And I saw that he was going to be back in X-Men 97 as a character, and so I was like, okay, for my Morph love, he's only in 5 episodes of the original series, but I'm a completionist at times about certain things. And so I want to revisit the original show, which still, a lot of these themes. So there's a extremist right-wing group called the Friends of Humanity that want to eradicate and basically genocide all mutants. And their leader is this very blustery, sort of Trump character. And this was done in the late 90s, the parallels and the commentary of these cartoons. You get that a lot with 80s and 90s cartoons, I think. They're still relevant today. Right. If you think back to the other cartoons I grew up on, are things like Captain Planet, and the bad guys are these environmentalists that are dumping oil in the ocean, and the superhero teens have to stop them. You climate, you're dumping stuff in the oceans, and it's hokey. But then you're actually, we're in a real climate crisis, and if we don't shape up, we won't be able to live on this planet anymore. And it's today, the parallels and the messaging is so crucial. I really feel like the 80s and the 90s were a perfect time to grow up with television and with animated series in particular because of the life lessons. And for X-Men still, the camaraderie among outsiders was basically the template that informed my whole life. Even when we found, the MuggleCasters and fellow Harry Potter fans, there's something about feeling included among a group that's excluded. So props to all those properties for really just showing me the way, I think, that I was going to find happiness.
That's so beautiful. What is your favorite nerdy thing?
My favorite nerdy thing would have to... Okay. I think, and I'm going to make a case here, I'm going to make an argument, see if you agree with me. I think podcasts are nerdy.
Yes, 100%. Totally agree.
Okay, I thought I was going to have to fight you on that a little bit. I mean, I actually didn't really, because you do a podcast called that, but but because there was a barrier of technology to start too. You had to download this thing from the internet, which was still very new. People weren't familiar with. You had to sync it to your mobile iPod. There was no iPhone at the time. There's something very geeky technology wise about podcasts. And podcasts as a medium have exploded and grown, and something like 30% of America, there's just so many people that are listening now. But I still think of podcasts as being nerdy. And if I can't say podcasts as my favorite nerdy thing, then certainly Harry Potter and being able to Harry Potter podcast. The reason it's my favorite is because it has afforded me so many opportunities.
Yeah.
Being a part of the podcast, this time meaning MuggleCast, really at a young age. I was 17 when that started, and that helped me learn to come into my own. It helped me learn to analyze. We were doing like literary analysis and stuff back in 2005, 2006, before the books were ending, and all that speculation of like, how's it going to end? You remember, the first 100 episodes of that show, we didn't know how Harry Potter was going to end.
Oh, that was so much fun.
I know. It was a really wonderful time. People don't understand like how many things had to culminate in order for the Harry Potter fandom to kind of be the global phenomenon that it was in the early aughts. But yeah, there's nothing I think before or after that can rival it for certain very like firm reasons. And I think part of it is because there was nothing like it at the time that was so widely circulated that was happening while the internet was starting and all this other stuff. And then the other part is, I can't go back to my teenage years where it felt like being a part of that was the best thing I would ever do in my life. I joke a lot about peaking in high school, but like while we were doing those shows and going to London, we did the 100th episode, which was a live book release from the top 2 stories of Waterstones, the biggest bookstore in the UK, for a midnight release party for the last Harry Potter book. We were on top of the world, certainly on top of London. And doing that live, going to bed, getting 30 minutes of sleep, and then recording the next episode of feedback after we somehow managed to read the book was just utterly absurd. There's never been anything like it. So it's my favorite because I have a lot of strong, powerful emotions, memories, etc. tied to it. And if that wasn't the same answer that my co-host gave, I'll be very surprised. But it is certainly my favorite thing.
Yeah. MuggleCast. So I started listening, I think I was about 13. It really changed my life too. Like I grew up with it, just listening to all of you and knowing that there were other Harry Potter fans out there and feeling like I had Harry Potter friends. It was so amazing. It's so wonderful. And I'm so glad that you're still doing it.
We are too. But it's definitely, that's what's always been great about it, is feeling like it was really the sum of the parts. Like MuggleCast began as a news recap show, a way to transmit the text-based news that was on MuggleNet's main page of the website to a new format in case it happened to, get either more people or people like scoop people up or interest people. Mm-hmm. And what we ended up finding out very early on was that we were like the same age as our audience mostly. And what ended up happening was the discussions that we were having were quickly becoming a circle of friends that were meeting to geek out and be passionate. And I think there was, again, sort of a perfect storm of, we had known each other. We were all passionate about Harry Potter, obviously, because you're all volunteering for MuggleNet. And the audience, the listener base, all wanted that content that we were providing. And would you say that your sort of hometown was like very small, or you just weren't many other outlets for you?
It wasn't too small, but the online fandom was very different.
Yeah.
one of my friends, she kept telling me to start this podcast, and I kept saying, or to just do a podcast, and I kept saying no, because I have high standards because of MuggleCast.
Oh, well, I think you're on a good track with this podcast. But also,
Thank you.
Yeah, and a lot of credit goes to Andrew Sims, who really had a hand in modeling the show after the shows that he listened to. I think it's probably safe to say he was the only original host that actively listened to podcasts back in 2005. Quite a few of them, and MuggleCast is really modeled after things like This Week in Tech and some of those early podcasts. And you know, Andrew was in the news crew of his school, and you know, really what he brought to MuggleCast was really a know-how and a structure that otherwise we would have lacked, because, you know, like I'm sure we would have had some good discussions, but the structure was always there to kind of hold us up and facilitate us along. And so I very much appreciate, like, we all really brought our own selves to it, and we brought our own selves to it like 100%. And so I really love that for all of us, and it ended up creating something that was greater than the sum of its parts, which is really cool. Obviously, we're still doing it 19 years later, so I assume it was a success at some of those things.
And what I love about it is if people want to go listen to it, they don't have to go listen from the beginning. They could just start right now.
Yeah, and we have, because at this point we've done 660 episodes of the show over the last 19 years. Wow. Many of them weekly, but some of them, you know, like we've had different ebbs and flows of regularity. But the last 6 years or so, or actually since we started the Patreon close to 8 years ago, we've more or less done weekly episodes. And so I think for the first year of the Patreon, it was monthly, and then we passed a threshold and we're weekly again. Okay, great. So 600 plus episodes. We also, but on our website, have things like the Wall of Fame, where we deliberately have chosen and sort of curated your listening experience, because, you know, our audio quality has only gotten better. Starting off, we were on old tech. We were recording using Audacity, which I still see people do podcasts with, and I think, my God, good luck, because I lost a couple of files. It was buggy and glitchy.
Oh, I cannot imagine that.
You're not a real podcaster until you've lost a
no,
full episode
don't
of podcast,
say that.
by
Don't
the
say
way.
that.
I know. Knock on wood. A wooden desk I'm knocking on right now. But yeah, it's just the nightmare of like early Skype. Our calls were over Skype. And all of that was just, but everything about it that was awful, we love, you know, and looking back, it was just what a time to do this. The idea of free internet calling, that the idea that anyone would have a strong enough internet connection to be able to call somebody and do a voice talk, and, you know, the more people we would add, the more the lag would be. I guess that's still true with like Zoom, but still, you know, it's just, there was a real learning curve, I think, for all of us, and we really adapted. We brought ourselves in a way that really worked, and also picked up a few skill sets. Again, like, I credit MuggleCast with really sort of coming into my own and realizing, oh, I have something to say. I have a perspective. My shtick is kind of being like the most geeky, passionate one in the room who like won't shut up about a thing, and I've having to learn also how to mediate and how to let others talk is a big deal. I had to learn that lesson, and it was really. But I think what shines through even in the earliest episodes is just how this was a perfect channel for the intense passion. And I think that's really important too. I think passion in podcasting and in life is better than perfection at the thing.
Ooh, yes. I love that.
So it's really important. And I think that was something that we were all passionate, and the show, that was very clear. I think that's what came through. And so we attracted like-minded people who just wanted to gush and were thinking about the same things we were, and that's also including a lot of feedback, having Muggle Mail or listener rebuttals every week, you know, was a huge thing that helped us grow, and it really felt like a close knit group of Harry Potter friends that were like meeting every week.
Love it. What are you currently nerdy about?
I am currently nerdy about, well, besides whatever the latest topic of What the Hype podcast is, which is because actually we recorded the intro episode for The Boys, which I think just came out last week because season 4 is starting. And I was sort of the newcomer guest on that episode. I had never seen The Boys. Laura was like, you should watch the pilot. Okay. Started that maybe 2 weeks ago we recorded it. I am now caught up on The Boys. 4 seasons in. I've caught the live episodes that have aired, etc. So, like, there's always something current that we're doing for that show that I would consider myself geeky about. But currently, as in looking to steadily over the next couple of months, LARPing.
Oh, that's so cool.
Have you ever done or know somebody who's done a LARP?
I haven't done it. I think I've known people, and I've driven by it happening, like in public parks and stuff a lot. And I always thought that was so cool, yeah.
That is really cool. Yeah, a lot of people think of it as like foam weaponry and kind of like nerdy Dungeons and Dragons kind of like outdoor area, which, hey, people are getting out and exercising. Don't knock it. But for me, I have been going to LARPs that are run by Moonrise LARP Games, which is based out of Chicago. There's a theater company that I've done things with called Otherworld Theater, and they have a wing of LARP games that are high fantasy. One of them is a magic school called Albion School of Sorcery, and another one that's sort of fantasy with politicking, Game of Thrones with like elves, is called Chronicles of the Realm. And in September, we're going back. I was thrilled to sort of create a character to play last year when it was in July, and it's in downstate Illinois. We rent out basically an estate and have the whole grounds of it for the world of the LARP.
That's
and
so
I gotta
cool.
Well, right. And same with the magic school, it was at Racine College in Wisconsin. You barely have to pretend, right? That the setting is such that it makes it really easy to believe that you're in another world. And what ends up happening is you develop a character, you work closely with the game master on it, and you can kind of challenge yourself. What are my characters' wants? What do they want? Why are they in this world? What connection might they have with other players in this world? And what are their wants? And the clever thing to do is to have your character have 2 wants, and they conflict. They're on an intersect pattern. That's an ideal way to create a character right away, because if you're just starting out, it can be like really overwhelming. But if you have 2 wants and you can't have both, ultimately there will be a conflict and a decision path for you to follow. I actually just realized I'm rambling about LARPs, but
no, this is so cool. I want to do this.
Oh, it's amazing. I highly recommend it. But yeah, it's what it is in a nutshell is collaborative storytelling and creation. And what you find out when you do these is by creating a character that isn't yourself and playing in like a fantasy world or whatever, you can learn a lot more about yourself than you ever thought possible. There's like a degree of separation where you're interacting with people in scenes as if you're having real conversations as that character, and they are a character. They're having real conversations with you. And inevitably, when it comes down to, do I decide to help this person, ally, whatever, you can play a character, but sometimes you'll still get caught off guard and be like, well, what would I do? And because it's filtering you through that in that way, you don't kind of realize just how healing it can be as well. A lot of people create characters that challenge themselves. If you're worried that you're not social enough in real life with friendships, you can create a character that's very outgoing and be the life of the party during the LARP, and see how you feel or see what skills you build for that. It's that kind of a thing. And ultimately, it's the game master's job to figure out how your character fits into the world, and there's an overall narrative that you're all sort of a part of. In our case, it was very sort of apocalyptic. We had to save the wizard school at Albion, and we're also trying to save the world in Chronicles of the Realm, but you're doing it with a group of people that are all at the absolute top of their game. It's an intersection of acting, costuming, and just socializing. Honestly, like regular old socializing. It takes all of your creative and it takes all your brain to do LARP, because the pressure and because of the high caliber, I think, of the LARPs that I attend. They're so-called blockbuster LARPs. You can do a LARP in 4 hours, and you don't need a costume. Like there are so many different variations of what LARP can be, but the type of LARPs that I get nerdy about are like the big ones. And so I'm nerdy about it currently because this is roughly around the time. So if the LARP is in September, this is roughly around the time I have to start putting together costume pieces. The brain rot slowly starts to take over where I'm like truly like almost lucid dreaming as my character going, okay, what's he gonna, where has he been since the last game, and what are his wants, how has that changed, and what relationships has he made along the way, or what has he learned about himself. Going back to a LARP is amazing because you're creating a sequel to the work you've already done. You're revisiting it, but there's always something new, and you can't always go back to exactly how things were, and the overall story is different. And it's just a really incredible way to challenge yourself, but also to have extremely human experiences in like under intense fake. What I say about LARPing is everything is fake, but the emotions are real. And that's the line I go back to, because it's like you really feel like here's an example. I played a character at the wizard school that was a big brother that had 3 siblings, and I didn't know these people that were my siblings during a 3-day LARP. And coming away from that weekend, I felt like they, in real life, the real people were my siblings. Like, wow. I loved them as a sibling. I cried, with them over events. You bond so fast with total strangers. And it's because the level of information that you're taking in and the experience that you have is that much more involved than just a passing sort of encounter at a coffee shop. So it's wild. It's like it can be a bit addictive. And afterwards, it's kind of like we always used to say this going to the Potter conferences, but afterwards there's like post-Potter depression, and it's kind of like or some. I think it's described. It's been adapted for regular Comic Cons, and it's been described as like con flu. Times it's like where you're just kind of depressed for 2 days after a thing because you're like, I had a really great experience.
Then you plan the next one.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get involved in planning the next one and stuff. So,
I love murder mystery parties and planning and getting into character. So I'm like, is this
that's LARP?
Yeah.
That is absolutely, that's absolutely, very much that's LARP. It has a structure. It has, kind of a bare bones outline or a script of like, obviously somebody is told that they are the ones that did it, or there's something being figured out behind the scenes. But in the meantime, put on a flapper outfit and just be very like boozy and, kind of have fun with people.
Yeah. So how would you recommend somebody like find that?
Yeah, there are basically like companies, depending on where you're located geographically, because like there's a LARP in Poland that's like just I would die if I went. It would be just amazing. But yeah, depending on where you're located, there may or may not be companies that do LARPs around you. I know somebody that does like 20 of them a year. I've done 2 a year, but like a lot of them are like along the eastern seaboard of the US. So I would say or suggest Googling like LARP near me. Live action roleplay is what it stands for, by the way. And so in particular in Chicago in the Midwest, Moonrise LARP Games is what the company is called. And they have Albion School of Sorcery and Chronicles of the Realm. And I mean, there's still tickets available. For Chronicles of the Realm, you'd have a few character meetings, find your bearings, pick a class or a species of character that you want to play, and you'd basically baptism by fire it. But there's the time now and over the next couple months is really just to acclimate and see kind of what everything's about. You're going to meet everybody. There's a Discord server. I think all the best LARPs really will ease you into it. They'll explain how the mechanics of the game work. Oh, kind of a red flag or something you should look out though for if you want to do it is whether the LARP has consent mechanics. And that is to say ways in which you can either end a scene if it's really making you, the person, uncomfortable, or for any reason if there needs to be like communication and certain banned topics that like you can be guaranteed won't come up in a LARP. Because you can be playing in these fantasy settings, you could be having a conversation about elves hating dwarves, and it can very suddenly turn into a realistic present day relevant discussion about immigration or racism and all this stuff. And so there's certain LARPs that'll flat out ban, topics that basically just ensure the safety and comfort level of everyone involved. So even in high fantasy, nobody's going to be triggered by things. And unfortunately, just like with live theater, there are companies that do it better, there are companies that do it worse, but the best LARPs will have consent mechanics and will have topics and sensitive, or at least be smart enough to do a content warning, because it can be pretty intense. Like I said, everything's fake, but the emotions are real. And it turns out that if you're playing a character and you're really happy, I wanted to play a character who gets yelled at a lot, turns out that can really actually affect you, because you've been spending all weekend, you mangy kid, it's like it's Scooby-Doo LARP where the adults are really actually pissed at you. It's like, oh God, what do I do?
I'm going to have you come back for us to have an entire episode about LARPing.
I know. I'm sorry. I've totally taken over the last 15 minutes or something, but it's phenomenal. Hopefully the tidbits that I have shared about LARP, it is my current obsession because, again, I have 3 months to prepare my next outing. But I played a mushroom fae character who is basically part of a hive mind of underground mushroom people that is separated from the hive mind. Think kind of like bees and queen bee and how that all works, but with mushroom people. And he's separated from all of this and has to fix the psychic link and connection that was caused by another mushroom person defecting their would-be queen. And so my character was, at the last Chronicles of the Realm, was uncomfortable with the idea of being an individual and was not comfortable with having choice because he'd never had it before. And so as a grand theme, I was playing with ideas and how I myself feel about free will, decision-making, and basically had to come up with a few arguments as to why free will was bad. And I, for one, really support democracy and love free will in real life. But as a character, as a challenge to myself, had to be no, this is bad. Everyone should just be told what to do by the hive mind. And it was a really relevant and fulfilling kind of mental exercise. Just one example of how you can really create something that is tailor-made to help you focus on. I think that, especially coming off of the Trump presidency, after the first Chronicles, I was very interested in ideas of free will and identity. And, LARP is a fantastic outlet to explore any or all of those themes. There's nothing else like it. It's live therapy.
I know, it sounds therapeutic.
It's extremely cathartic. And that's why you can go in with strangers 3 days later and feel like they're really family.
What is the most underrated nerdy thing about you?
Okay. Underrated nerdy thing.
I'm excited for your answer.
Well, it's funny because there are certainly I've just really been able to follow my passions, which I know we'll talk about. But one of the times I did that, and I think it kind of bombed, is with a character that I did. So I do some cosplays over the years. I love doing that at conventions, and not just Harry Potter conventions, but the local Comic-Cons and things like that. One such character was named Elvis Dumbledore, and was this play on Elvis Presley if he were a wizard. And how it got started was the costume designer, Andrea Wakely, out of Twin Roses Designs in Virginia, made my first ever Gryffindor Harry Potter robes. Back in 2004, I was 16. I was going to London for the first time, and I wanted to dress up. I wanted to feel in character in England. We were going to filming locations. We went to Oxford. We were having a blast, and I developed a relationship to where basically this costume designer would continue to make other LARP costumes. So we did a Robin Hood thing and all this other stuff throughout the years. She had the idea, what if Elvis were a wizard? And I said, well, awesome, I see that, and I raise you, what if he's actually Dumbledore? Because the canon at the time. It was just after Deathly Hallows came out, and there was still a lot about Dumbledore we didn't know, but we knew he had a fight with his brother. We knew there was a falling out, and he had some regrets. And based on the pre-Fantastic Beasts movie timeline, Dumbledore would have had that falling out with his brother right around the 1950s or so, which is also when Elvis Presley was becoming famous. So my whole thing was to create, it was like basically the costume was made for me, and I went to Virginia to film a mockumentary as this character, as if it were a real biography of Albus Dumbledore when he was known as Elvis, and it basically created a 13-minute YouTube video that has, to this day, 200 views. It's the least successful thing I've ever made in my life.
Well, I need the link to that.
Oh, absolutely. It's going in all the show notes. We're going to totally promote it because I need more eyes on this. I did filks like Harry Potterized lyrics to the Elvis Presley songs. And disclaimer, I can't really sing that well, okay? I certainly don't have the Elvis voice. Hubba hubba, not very much. So I don't sound great, but the passion is there. Again, passion is more important than perfection.
Yeah, I love that line.
I think I have to credit my girlfriend for it. Meg came up with that before we were recording.
Perfect.
But yeah, she does all my best work, by the way. Really, like, surround yourself with people who are brilliant and you come off looking better is also a life philosophy. But again, the costume was modeled after Elvis's American tour, where he has like a sequin eagle on the back of like a white suit. And so because it was Dumbledore, it was made to be a phoenix on the side of the thing. Anyway, we put on the costume, we did a huge photo shoot, we did this mockumentary that's on YouTube, and I say it's underrated just because it never received the level of attention that I thought it deserved for just the level of work that went into it. And there's actually another 10-minute part 2 of the documentary, which is also... So there's like 22 minutes of footage just out there of this crazy Harry Potter fan with an impeccable costume and nerve, creating this thing. And I don't know, it's when you think of like underrated, I can't think of anything that comes close to it, because everything else we did was like directly through MuggleCast. It was more successful, it was more seen. But for some reason, Elvis Dumbledore has not yet had his day. I actually brought him out at LeakyCon last year in Chicago and did a panel with as him to try and generate, more views and stuff. So I still have the costume, I still have everything, but it really just sometimes you sink and sometimes you swim.
Everybody listening right now, pause this episode, go to the show notes, and go watch this YouTube video.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who gives me a chance. Yeah, I took it to LeakyCon Portland in 2013, and people just didn't get it. And that was okay, because again, like, nobody had seen the YouTube video. But, it was, I just kind of felt awkward, and then I felt kind of ashamed at having spent all that time on the product and the thing, but ultimately it's all about that collaboration. The whole point of the mockumentary was actually not to get seen. When you make something that you care about, you make it for yourself first. And what it represented to me was the collaboration between me and Twin Roses Designs, because getting to like model that costume and showcase it was like the greatest. It was the first time I felt like a real runway model for something, is literally like, come here and put this on. It's so many collisions of fantasy and creativity. It's so many ways of exploring the way in which we as people can be creative and can showcase our passion. MuggleCast is a perfect example of this. We're passionate about Harry Potter. We are creating something new within that space. And same with any wizard rock band that's doing songs from the books. Any of those people that were living in that world has nothing to do with the author, and has everything to do with the time and the place and the people that are there when it hits.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Harry Potter is more, for me, more about the community and the fans than anything else.
Yeah, I completely agree. I could not agree more.
I'm really looking forward to your answer to the next one. What is the most random nerdy thing about you?
You might have heard this is the thing.
Okay.
So that's the fun days. Like, I love being like, okay, here's the underrated thing. But the random thing, and it's because you're a longtime listener of MuggleCast, you might have heard this. This comes up every couple of years. When I first got into the Harry Potter books, it was the early days of the internet, and I could not, for the life of me, score an ebook of the Harry Potter books. Do you know where this is going, by the way?
No, and I'm like, I feel like a terrible fan.
Oh, fantastic. No, I'm thrilled. I'm honestly thrilled right now, Morgan. So, ebooks weren't really a thing. There was no Kindle. There was no iTunes store with ebooks in it yet. And I could tell that Harry Potter was deeper than it appeared. When you read it, you can tell there's clues happening. They were so meticulously plotted and so crazily designed and so dense that I knew there was more going on. One of my skills early on as a teenager or a preteen was typing. I could type fast. And I came up with the idea of, if I can't find an ebook of Harry Potter, I will type it. So I read the first 3 Harry Potter books at a computer desk much like this one. I had the book open. Actually, I have the book over there. I had the book open on my lap and would put it just under the desk and then type the book as it happened. I typed the entire first 3 books that way into Microsoft Word, saving each chapter, got its own document. I also was proficient in MS Paint, which is this ridiculously basic paint program. And in the US, the Harry Potter books have chapter art by Mary Grand Prix, little chapter headers. And I redesigned each of them in MS Paint in full color, which at that point was probably 256 colors, and created my own electronic first 3 Harry Potter books.
That's amazing.
And by the way, the purpose of this was not just because I was passionate. I wanted to be able to do a find command, like a Control F find command. I wanted to be able to find the mysteries and the secrets and find all the references to Sirius Black. Is he mentioned anywhere else? Or all the times that the number 12 is mentioned, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that was before the 5th book was out. That's why I did it. But the fact that I had done that caught the interest of the webmaster of MuggleNet.com, Emerson Spartz. And it was because I was so clearly an extra person that just was very too much and extra about Harry Potter that caused him to give me a chance on MuggleNet, which I know gets into sort of like the nerd trajectory. But it's so random of a thing to have done, and it certainly doesn't come up often because, like, by the time it came for me to type book 4, I realized that on Napster you could actually get like a pirated copy that was either from the publisher or something digital, and so I quickly made it was obsolete. There was no longer any purpose to doing what I was doing. Yeah, I think it's pretty random to have. I'm the only person I know that's ever done that, but I'll tell you how it benefited me in the future, apart from getting me the gig at MuggleNet, was the words of the Harry Potter books were flowing through me. And what that did for a kid with undiagnosed ADHD is it caused me to remember everything. It's a little bit different than just reading.
You're right.
And there's something involved where you're also writing, you're creating. I don't claim to write the Harry Potter books, of course, I could never. But the words being processed through like my cerebral cortex or whatever really burned them into my memory. It's like if you wrote an essay in college and you can still quote the thesis, or like the opening statement, or if you still remember bits of what you yourself have written. I had that for many years thereafter for the first 3 Harry Potter books. And so it was endlessly useful when we needed a fact. I've forgotten it all now, but if you ever need a fact about the first 3 Harry Potter books, I was your guy. And it was very helpful in the early days of MuggleCast for me to have that kind of recall ability. And it was plenty of people have read the books more often than I have, or more numerous times. But because of that art of like actually typing it, something about it really made those books stick in my mind. And I'm the only person I know that's ever done anything like that. So that's why I say it was random.
Wow, this was the most diverse nerdy identity segment I think I've had on the show.
Oh God,
I love it. I love it.
Well, yeah, no, thanks for asking all the questions. Definitely, I wanted every answer to not be, Harry Potter, but yeah.
I love it. Okay, so are you ready to get into your journey into fandom?
Yes. When I think about a fandom journey, I think about how much that word has evolved, fandom, and how sort of familiar it was to like us at first, which was to say next to not at all. Fandom definitely pre-existed before Harry Potter. And some of the earliest fandoms were things like Star Trek, which in the mid-60s, when that show was airing, successfully lobbied, via a letter writing campaign, physical letters physically posted in the mail, to get a third season of the show because the show was chronically underfunded and got canceled. And the fans spoke up. There were mailing lists. The Beatles had a mailing list and newsletter. Fandom itself, there are examples of even large communities existing as early as the 60s. But the internet was the crucible that I think catapulted it all into the stratosphere. And being able to find like-minded individuals that liked the same thing as you without having to travel to wherever your nearest convention was huge, and made it so much more accessible, made fandom itself more accessible, and made the property that the fandom was based on more accessible. The internet really just sped that up, and fan forums, PHPBB forums existed, I know, for Harry Potter and many, many others. And so when I think about sort of the journey and how it's grown, a lot of people, even when I visited my first Harry Potter convention, which back then were called Harry Potter conference, even, it wasn't even, convention wasn't as common of a thing to say or call it, because it was also a little bit more academic. So you think of it as a conference instead of a convention. But cosplay was not as big. And now people seem to know, general audiences seem to know that cosplay is a very fun thing to do when you go to your local Comic-Con. And people who otherwise don't engage heavily in any particular online community of fandoms know enough to either design a cosplay or sort of low-key Disney bound one of the things that they're passionate about. And so really, when I think of the journey into fandom, it's a journey across time as it became more socially acceptable to just be very passionate and to be a fan of something. And so I think of just gradually seeing the stigma that may have been die down. And now you almost get FOMO if you don't dress up at a convention. I always mean to ask Andrew and Micah if they have FOMO watching me gallivant around as Elvis Dumbledore, and they don't. But I feel like not only is it cool to be a nerd, but the bigger a nerd you are, there's this crazy social clout that can come with it. And that, I would argue, is very new. That, I would argue, is within the last 2 decades that tide has turned.
Yeah, it's cool to be a nerd now.
Right. And yet, some of the earliest fandoms, again, Star Trek in the 60s, but also Doctor Who, which actually predates Star Trek by 3 years. Doctor Who, if you talk to people who were Doctor Who fans in the 80s, some of the only ways that you could get the oldest episodes, which were the BBC has lost episodes of Doctor Who that were just overwritten or burned in a fire, and you can't see. It's that long ago that the media is not digital. It's not ever. But people who would mail VHS tapes to each other in the early 80s were the early fandoms, so that everyone could see the thing. They were bullied relentlessly in school. in social lives. And you'll get these people at these panels to talk about sort of what it was like being a nerd, because these days being a nerd is like being royalty. It's like so wonderful and everybody understands you're exploring your passions. These people carry deep scars because they were nerds back when movies like Revenge of the Nerds were out, and back when it was okay to shove people into lockers, and back when it was okay to bully somebody for being a little different than yourself. Things that would never fly today. Nevertheless, if you rewatch The Breakfast Club, it's a good example too. They're horrible to each other. That has changed so much. It's sad to hear older fans talk about how little it was accepted back then versus now. But there's also some joy in it because we've turned that corner, I think.
So what is it like for you to be a part of the fandom and to have people that are fans of you?
It's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit weird because like there was the first live MuggleCast we ever did was in New York City at the end of 2005, like November 2005, for the Goblet of Fire movie premiere, and it was the top floor of a Barnes and Noble. We really like the top floor of bookstores for some reason. It's just where their event space is. And for the first time we met in person. It was a live Leaky Mug, so the Pottercast podcast and Melissa from the Leaky Cauldron website was there. It was a joint collab between MuggleNet and the Leaky Cauldron website called The Leaky Mug. Anyway, our listeners showed up, and after the event, they asked us to sign their Harry Potter books, and they would bring copies of their Harry Potter books and have us and ask us to sign, because there's not a lot else you're going to bring for like people to sign, but for us, we were fans of Harry Potter. We read those same books voraciously, and the binding had fallen apart because we were so, voracious about it. But getting to hold somebody else's Harry Potter book was like holding one of the organs of their body. It was literally like, you've given me your heart, and I'm supposed to, etch my name into this thing? Not like, we aren't J.K. Rowling, it too. And it was so interesting. The first real pinch me moment was being asked unironically to sign somebody's Harry Potter book, because to them, they would always associate what we were doing, which, let's be clear, was just gushing nonstop about Harry Potter for an hour at a time.
But it was also your relationships, your theories, the way you communicated. People really feel seen, understood, and heard listening to all of you.
Thank you. And I don't mean to be crass. I might be using more flippant terms to like showcase how wild it was for a 17-year-old to be in the spotlight like this. Because it was a high. It was great, but mostly we were deeply moved. It gave me, an outsider who never felt like he belonged anywhere, a sense of purpose, a sense of accomplishment that I otherwise would have no right to feel. It gave me so much confidence that I needed in both myself, and it allowed me to overcome any kind of like fear or barrier to doing things like traveling or doing things like taking my opinions and keeping them out there. I became a more confident person. I became a less self-conscious person, and learning that somebody else was at the other end of that line, was listening, via their earpods to the show, was deeply impactful. And I'll never get over it. So early on in the early days of MuggleCast too, there was a group of people. MuggleCast had an AOL chat room, and it was an IRC chat. I forget. I think it might have been both. It was first an IRC chat, and then it moved to an AOL chat room called MuggleCast Fan. And at any point, you could boot up AOL and go to the AIM directory of chat rooms and type in MuggleCast Fan and be entered into this room where it's just 20 people at a time that are just chatting about MuggleCast. Probably like the latest episode. A group of the super fans from that chat room started their own podcast called the MuggleCast Fan Chat Cast, where it was a podcast that talked about the latest episode of MuggleCast, the podcast.
I had no idea. What? How did I miss this?
It aired I have them. There were 13 episodes that aired in 2005, and it's wonderful, but it's also very niche, right? Or very, very like It's Inception with podcasts, because it's Harry Potter fans that aren't us talking about Harry Potter fans that are us talking about Harry Potter. Mm-hmm. And it's as wild as it gets. But, like, that was the kind of crazy stuff that was happening when you just get, that's how passionate people were, not about us, but about Harry. That is how much of a fire, how much of a light that those books put, literally a spell that they put everyone under, is that you had to think about it, and it fueled many a waking moment, I think, for all of us. And so anyone that did anything in this space, any Wizard Rock group or any podcaster of Harry Potter, etc., became, I think the term in media studies is big name fan. You know, it's that fan who really is just a fan, but they're well known to other fans. And I've also heard the term, it's a little not generous, faux celebrity, which makes me laugh always when I think about it. But that's right. That's what we were. You know, it's like people come to this bookstore downtown in New York because your podcast is doing a live show there. In 2005, if you asked your dad to drive you, he'd be like, what's a podcast? You know, really, these were unprecedented, like early times. So it was wild because early on, it was a success early on, but for me, the journey of like having people care about, you know, what I said or care about the content that we all were creating just made me feel more proud to be a part of it, and also more lucky. I spent a lot of time feeling lucky and feeling grateful to everyone else for putting up with me talking too much, and also just we all saw what each other brought. We had a respect for each other. That is why we still do this, and why we continue to do new podcast projects with each other, is because through the years we got good at doing what we do, or at least have always respected what each other can bring to a conversation. It's been wild. I'm still waiting for podcasting to be my full-time job, but you know, after 20 years of doing it, I want that to happen for
you so bad.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, it would just be because everyone dreams of having the job that doesn't feel like a job, right? Mm-hmm. That job where it's like I can do what I love as a job. Mm-hmm. And, you know, to some extent, MuggleCast has supported us and has been wonderful and all that. But yeah, like the sky is the limit. I think that what we've done, and you're a perfect example, you know, reaching out and saying you've been listening for so long and that it really helped, like impacted you. And we do that segment, you know, Chicken Soup for the MuggleCast Soul,
mm-hmm.
which even early on just said that our podcast made a difference to people. And that's even if we had never traveled for the show or whatever, getting that kind of feedback from people, because podcasting is so isolating. You feel like you're talking into the void. You never quite know who's listening on the other end. And hearing from people has always been consistently the number one great thing about it.
That's amazing. I will support all of you in like any project you ever do, because I think I can't remember where I said it, but podcasting is so much work, and you all are putting in so much effort, and I think you should be getting like paid enough that it's all you do. Because why not? We have all these celebrities having podcasts. Like,
and then also some people who are celebrities, and you're like, wait, what do they do? What are they famous for? You know, have they put in over 1,000 hours into podcasting? No. I know. You know, but you can't break it down like that. You really can't compare one thing to another. But we've been the people who listen to our show have been very vocal throughout the years. And that's really all we needed. We've all grown into first young adults and now adults. Now, you know, we're millennials or elder millennials here. But, you know, there's entire generations who were born after our podcast started, because they're going up on 19 years. I know. There was an idea once. I'll give you an exclusive here.
Ooh.
I wanted to do like a MuggleCast Junior. Either podcast or series of episodes of regular MuggleCast, where there were two concepts. One is all of our children do a podcast, which none of us have kids, so that's going to be another 10 or 15 years minimum. But or we get people who were born when our podcast came out, like in August of 2005 or so, or we get people that are 19 now. Like,
my niece is around that age, and she's reading Harry Potter for the first time. Shout out to you, Riley.
And we give Riley a podcast, and we call it MuggleCast Jr., and we do it, the only prompt is, talk about your passion for Harry Potter in a loose enough but like consistent format for a couple weeks. And, you can have our podcast feed, call it MuggleCast Jr. And, hi, we're the new host of a high-pitched voice. It's probably how high my voice was at first. But yeah, I've always thought it's like, how can we use and utilize the longevity and the age of the show to our advantage? Because it's wild. You know this. The Quizzitch answers at the end of the show are like from Luke, the 13-year-old, and Forrest, the 11-year-old. And everybody who writes in is 11, 12, or 13. And we're like, I remember 2014. I remember 2012.
I know, it's wild.
I was out of college. I was, it's just unbelievable. The young generation, they crack me up. But yeah, people really are. Harry Potter has endured. And finding Harry Potter for the first time, whether your parents are introducing it to you because they were fans or, through whatever means, people who are finding it for the first time are having the same emotions that we had. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that the whole like MuggleCast back catalog, because we do get new listeners that say, I went through the whole back catalog. I'm like, wow, just unbelievable. But the idea that it's still all up there, really matters. And, we were always warned the internet is forever. But our podcast is an example of how that's not always a terrifying thing, because there's nothing like those first 100 episodes of speculation. It's a time capsule.
Now I kind of want to go back and re-listen.
There are transcripts if you can't do it. If you don't have the time, you can read. The time. Yeah, you can read the episode or have like Google Assistant read it to you.
I want to hear all of you and the chemistry and the interactions.
Andrew's voice probably changed the most, Micah's the least, but yeah.
What does being a nerd mean to you?
To me, it's about the passion. Yeah. To me, it's about, there's almost a bravery to it, because even though today you're not bullied in the way that you would have been 30, 40 years ago for being passionate about things that society deemed to be too fringe, like Dungeons and Dragons, there is still something so brave, because there's still something so vulnerable about sharing something that you might be interested in against people who might potentially not be interested in that thing. That's a vulnerable thing to do. To say I love something, it's like the people who say like to love somebody is to be vulnerable. Like that's the point. To love a show or to love a thing in a deep way, something that resonates you and shapes part of your identity, is equally vulnerable. And vulnerability is what we're going for in humanity here, and empathy and all this great stuff. And it all lies on the other side of trying to be cool or putting up a front, and so to me, being nerdy just means that you found that thing that you connect with, that makes you come alive, that is just going to make you think on life and the human experience in a new and interesting way. Or, at the very least, just entertains you and takes you out of things. I think nerdiness will always, for me, be tied to escapism, especially because the trajectory I've been able to lay down on this episode about, X-Men wanting to go to the mutant school, Harry Potter wanting to go to the wizard school. I wanted to exist in these other worlds and have the joys that come from the camaraderie and the community of the characters that I was reading or watching about. So nerdiness will always be tied to escapism for me, but that's not to say that those lessons aren't also then portable back into your daily life, whatever your situation is in reality.
Wow. What a meaningful episode. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I've had a lot of fun talking about this. I said to you, I think weeks ago now, I was like, what's the time limit on these episodes? Because I knew I could talk for, so much longer even about LARP or any of these topics, but no, I really love this mission that you're on.
Yeah,
I love the idea. I love the concept of asking nerds about their journey, because every episode is going to be different, because everybody is different.
Yeah.
Even if they liked the same exact things at the same exact time, they have an entirely different or response or reason or personality or reflections.
Yeah.
And also, I love that aspect of it where people can be reflective of their lives. That's a really cool, almost like there's journalistic integrity and there's like a documentarian sort of unearthed footage, about it. That's all really cool to me, too.
Thank you. Well, I had to bring some of my therapist roots in here.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I definitely will want to have you back. I'm already trying to work on like questions to ask for people who come back on a second time. So, well, we're not done. We have our geeky recommendations.
Absolutely.
For today, I want to obviously recommend checking out MuggleCast and What the Hype. Like, you need to join this fandom, everybody listening, because like that is its own fandom in itself. And I also want to recommend, and I've recommended this on the show before, but I think it's always helpful to remind people, bookclubs.com. It's an amazing website where you can find both in-person and virtual book clubs in your area. I have joined a couple, probably too many. I don't have enough time to read all the books, but they have been they have been life-changing for me, meeting people, going to these meetings, reading books that maybe I wouldn't have read before. Highly recommend. So again, that's at bookclubs.com. I'm not sponsored. I'm not getting paid. I just love that website.
My recommendation for this is kind of just, I think it really touched on the words of wisdom of like, passion is more important than perfection.
I love that. I
am a person who, when it comes to writing, get hung up on how a sentence is formed. I'll write, 2-3 straight sentences and then be completely unable to continue because I'm worried about perfection. I'm worried about making it sound right. I don't just, you have to push through and just write and save, if you can, the inner critic and the revision for later. And it's such it's so important that we can just go out there, feel what we feel, and have the courage to embrace sort of our feelings and find what it is that we can be creative of, even if it's imperfect at first, even if we attempt a really ambitious cosplay, and it rips, part of the costume rips midday at the con, and that's why they have those cosplay repair emergency booths, by the way. But like, the point is not that this thing went wrong with your costume. The point is that you learned a new skill, or you taught yourself, or you engaged in what you care about in a physical and productive way that you wouldn't have before. And that's how we grow. And it's so important that we grow, because to stand still is not going to prepare us for all of life's difficulties and how versatile we need to be to continue to address growing problems in society and be more productive and help each other out in this world.
I love that. So passion, not perfection.
Passion over perfection.
Passion over perfection. That might be the episode title.
Hey, that's good. Meg will be thrilled.
Yeah. Eric, thank you so much for being here. Morgan. I still just can't believe I'm getting to chat like with all of you. Like, I've been listening to MuggleCast for years, and I was like, I'll never meet them. I'll never talk to them. And now, like, you all are on my podcast. Like,
yeah.
What?
It's cool, but we all believe in it. We all absolutely think it's really cool what you're doing. And
thank you.
We're just always touched when people reach out, and for such a cool opportunity. It was really cool. There was never a way I was ever going to be like, oh, I'm not interested. Sorry.
I was real. Every time I ask, I'm scared. I'm like, oh no, they're going to say no, they don't have time, they're not interested. So it's like, thank you for saying yes.
Absolutely.
So where can people find you?
People can find me on one of my many podcasts, including MuggleCast, the Harry Potter podcast. That's MUGGLE cast. What the Hype podcast, That's HYPE !! I think just typing What the Hype without the punctuation will get you there. Also, many of these shows are all linked in each other's social media bios, so if you find one, you can find the rest. But I also have a personal podcast where I interview my friends about things which they are passionate about. It's on a hiatus. I said to myself when I started it, I wasn't going to adhere to any deadlines, and so that's why it's been 3 years. But it's called Thank You for Spieling, Spieling. There's about 30 episodes overall that aren't about HBO's The Last of Us show. And then on top of that, there's about 10 episodes about HBO's show The Last of Us that I did on my spin-off podcast. Thank you for sparring. Anyway, that's my own personal passion project where I had full creative control. I was like, let's go balls to the wall. They're not all 3-hour episodes, but, some got pretty long, and it was really just about interviewing people about stuff that they geek out about, and it was a lot of fun. So
love it.
Do check that out if you really want more. Like, there's a Doctor Who episode, there's an episode about Crash Bandicoot, there's an episode with my childhood best friend about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, the first video game we were really obsessed with together. So a lot of topics, a lot of good memories, a lot of nostalgia, but again, it's all about where we find that passion and how the things we love define us.
Love it. And of course, I'll share links to all of that and your Elvis Dumbledore video in the show notes.
Yeah, okay. I'll be sure to send you that link right away.
Okay.
I know you're eager to watch it, and great, awesome.
Thank you again so much for being here.
Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
All right, everybody, thank you for listening. If you can please make sure that you are following That Nerd Thing in your favorite podcast app so that you never miss an episode. And I would love it so much if you could please leave That Nerd Thing a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you are watching on YouTube, please be sure to subscribe and like this video. You can get in touch with me via email at thatnerdthingpod@gmail.com. And you can follow the show on Instagram and TikTok at thatnerdthingpod. And be sure to share the show with your nerdy friends. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.